And our next guest this morning is Sofia Fernandes, and she is a Senior Research Fellow at the Jacques Delors Institute in Paris and Director of the Académie Notre Europe. Good morning. Great to see you.
Good morning, Brian. Good morning, Mr. Nicolas Schmid, Minister Elisabeth Born. Good morning, everyone. Let me first of all thank the European Commission for this invitation. It is a pleasure for me to participate in this high-level forum and have the opportunity to present some of the conclusions of the report on individual learning accounts published last December by the Jacques Delors Institute and the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. Being the last one to speak in this panel, I might repeat some ideas that were already presented, but I will try to build upon the points raised by Mr. Scarpetta and Mr. Chacroun while emphasizing some ideas. And at the end, it's not surprising that we get to the same conclusions as we study to a great extent the same national experiences. The question I was asked to answer is, what are the priorities for setting up individual learning accounts in the EU? And to answer this question, I will focus on 4 points. The first point is the question of the magnitude, understanding and recognizing the magnitude of the EU skill challenge. The second, understanding why individual learning accounts should be part of the answer to this challenge. The third one, identifying the main guidelines to create successful individual learning accounts. And the last point, the need to guarantee the portability of training rights across EU countries. The previous speakers have already highlighted the magnitude of the challenge, but let me in a few words emphasize 2 ideas. On the one hand, as has been mentioned, the need for reskilling and upskilling is greater than ever and will continue to intensify for the reasons that the previous panelists outlined. And on the other hand, the adult learning systems in the EU are not, for the most of them, ready to tackle this challenge, as they present several shortcomings. It has already been mentioned that the rise in non-standard work and the fragmentation of careers are making access to training more difficult for many people. But we also witness a lack of inclusiveness, as data from Eurostat shows that those who need training the most, namely the low-skilled, the unemployed, the older workers, they train the least. To get more people into training, member states will have to address these shortcomings, but 2 other ones, which are the lack of investment in adult training, as was mentioned by Commissioner Nicolas Schmid, and the poor quality of some of the trainings offered to adults. Against this backdrop, why can individual learning accounts offer a solution to this challenge? I will outline 3 main reasons. The first one was already mentioned this morning and concerns the improved access to adult learning for all individuals, including those in non-standard contracts or with a weaker link to their employer, as the training rights are attached to the individuals and they are portable across jobs, occupations, and the employment status. So there is this universality that is really important with individual learning accounts. As was mentioned, individual learning accounts can also target some specific groups, but what we conclude from our literature review and case studies is that we need to have a universal system, and I will come back to this point. The second reason why ILAS can be an answer is that their creation can also act as a catalyst to provide answers to the other shortcomings of adult learning systems that are mentioned. As the French experience illustrates, the creation of individual learning accounts can include specific provisions to reach out some disadvantaged groups or lead to improvements in the certification and monitoring of adult trainings, thus contributing to the increase in quality of the training offer. The third reason is that we keep saying that people need to adopt a life cycle approach to learning, but the truth is that there is a real lack of awareness on the need to train among Europeans, and Commissioner Nicolas Schmid mentioned this number. 80% of non-learners in the EU do not train because they do not want to, and more specifically because they do not believe there is a need for them to further train. So we need more incentives to get adults into the adult learning system, and granting individual and portable training rights to citizens can help generate a shift in mindset and create the culture of lifelong learning that is needed in the EU. That is why universality is so important to get this change of mindset. If ILAS are to fulfill their purpose, they need to be well designed. And here the EU has a key role to play to guide member states' action on the basis of the lessons learned from national experiences in the EU and beyond. That is why in our report, Klervi Kerneïs and I asked the European Commission to propose an EU recommendation setting common guidelines for the creation of individual learning accounts. The creation of this new tool at the national level and not at the EU level will leave room for national specificities and allow individuals and national stakeholders to take ownership of the initiative. And the common guidelines will ensure a coordinated approach at the EU level. Based on the analysis of national practices, we identify in our report several guidelines, and I will focus on 3 of them today. First, even if individual learning accounts should be a universal system, they should include specific provisions to target those who need training the most, as was raised by Mr. Scarpetta. That is what is done in France, where the lowest qualified workers receive 800 euros a year against 500 euros a year for the other workers. But the additional financial support for some disadvantaged groups must also include the possibility of benefiting from training leaves with income replacement. That is very important to reach out these groups. But additional financial support is not sufficient. These disadvantaged groups will not automatically be informed of their rights. Easy access to information on individual learning accounts is needed for all individuals through a dedicated website and an application through which learners can see their training rights. But some communication campaigns should target specifically these groups, and some actors will have a crucial role to play to reach them, namely the trade unions and the public employment services. In addition, guidance through counseling sessions is essential to help people define a career plan and make informed training choices. These should include comprehensive skills assessment and validation in order to give visibility to skills acquired in non-formal and informal settings, thus making ILAS more inclusive. And as was already mentioned by Mr. Chacroun and Mr. Scarpetta, it is true that individual learning accounts focus on formal training, but it is not the only tool that we have, so we have to have other tools for non-formal and informal learning. The second guideline concerns the relevance and quality of training, because individual learning accounts entail 2 major risks in this respect. The first risk is that the training offer increases dramatically, leading to poor quality training. Guaranteeing the high quality of the training offer is crucial to set people up for success and avoid abuses and frauds. The issue of training quality should be tackled both upstream of the training through the certification of training courses, as in the case of the French Compte Personnel de Formation, but also downstream, thanks to public monitoring and participants' peer review, as it happens in Singapore. Information about quality, this information should be available to the public via kind of TripAdvisor, but for adult training courses. Individual learning accounts should also ensure that workers develop skills relevant for the labor markets of today and tomorrow. The forecasting of skills needs at all levels, the European level, national, regional, and sectoral level, and involving all the relevant actors, in particular the social partners, plays an essential role in this. But even if we can identify the in-demand skills, as individual learning accounts are also about empowering individuals, these individuals cannot be obliged to choose a given training. Here, top-ups, which are additional rights, can be used to incentivize individuals to acquire some specific skills. For instance, last year in Singapore, as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, a top-up was granted to individuals willing to acquire some specific skills, including digital skills. My third guideline is about the link between individual learning accounts and the existing initiatives and stakeholders in adult learning. Individual learning accounts are not meant to be a new isolated blanket instrument. They should build on the broader adult learning ecosystem, as was mentioned by Mr. Scarpetta, and should be designed and implemented in close partnership with the relevant stakeholders, such as the companies, trade unions, regional authorities, or training providers. Individual learning accounts are supposed to provide a basic right for all individuals, but this basic right should be completed through other programs led by different stakeholders. Individual learning accounts are by no means to replace the role of companies as learning places and providers of training for their workers. In France, companies can top up the account of their workers, but other actors can also top up the individuals' accounts, such as the regional authorities, the trade unions, or the public employment services. EU funds, such as the European Social Fund Plus, the European Globalization Fund, the Just Transition Fund, could also be used to top up individual learning accounts. Of course, these funds are already available and used by member states, but ILAS could be the opportunity to make these funding programs visible to European citizens by clearly labeling and advertising European co-financing on people's learning accounts. Now that I've presented our three main guidelines, I come to my last point, which concerns the need to ensure that mobility between EU countries does not result in a loss of acquired training rights for the individuals. To guarantee this portability of rights across countries, we propose in our report a three-step approach, starting with the possibility to use training rights for online trainings delivered by training providers in the home country when moving to another EU country. The second stage includes a real portability of rights with the possibility to use them in any EU country. And finally, the third stage foresees the setting up of a European individual learning account. This goes beyond the scope of this presentation, but I wanted to raise this point as this is a key issue for mobile workers and the EU has a key role to play to ensure this portability across countries. Mr. Nicolas Schmidt started with Jacques Delors, and I will finish my presentation with Jacques Delors also. So let me, to conclude, quote Jacques Delors, who called in 1991 for the creation of an individual right to training. He said, "We must create a right to training for each worker during all their working life." 30 years later, 30 years after this call, it is time to act. Thank you for your attention.